Hey folks, Dirt Race Life. I'm Jason.
I'm Ryan.
And we're going to put this fuel cell in front of the rear end instead of behind it. We're going to show you the logic for why we're doing this on this build. Hopefully it'll make sense to you too. So let's get started. This is a 22-gallon wedge cell right here. You see I've got the cut in it? Okay, so why 22-gallon? Well, I normally run 16-gallon, but on this build right here, the crate ration allows for E85 on the 602s. If I decide to go with that engine option, I would run the E85. What I'm seeing on the big races, I'm seeing 40 or 50 lap races. And with what I'm used to burning roughly 3 to 4 gallons of fuel in like a 15 lap feature. And so I figured that up, and then E85, you're burning 1.5 times the amount of fuel as you do on gasoline. And so 16 gallons didn't look like that it was going to work for me on E85 if I did run a 40 or 50 lap race. And for that reason, I stepped up to the 22-gallon cell. Does make for a challenge on fitting it where I want it, but I went with a wedge cell. And I made one modification. I did trim this back to give myself just a little bit more room. So you see that I put in some sheet metal screws down through here, and I trimmed this edge back just a little bit. Doesn't hurt anything. Like I said, put screws back in, but put them in closer to so that we could trim that back. And so this is the fuel cell that we're going to use. Now, let's look at where we're going to put it. The way we have constructed this chassis, we have about 14 inches between the back of the cockpit here and the cross member in front of it. And the wedge itself on a 22-gallon is only 12 inches at the bottom. So it's going to sit right in here with the wedge running out over the rear end. Just keep in mind, this being a 73-77 frame, I'm a 112-inch chassis, and I've got a little bit more room in my frame from where the frame turns to where this cross member is. On a metric, this is shorter if you're setting your cockpit back as far as you can. But it may still work out well in a plan with like a 16-gallon wedge. You just have to look at your dimensions and how it works out on the plan. And the reason that I made that little trim is just so that I'm not rubbing against my cockpit right here. Now, let's talk about why we're doing this. When we look at ballast in cars, if we were doing a top-down view of a car, we know that we always want any ballast, and when I say ballast, I mean lead. Also, you look at any movable weight, like where you put the battery, where you put the fuel, where you put the lead, where you put the things that you can move. That's your ballast that you're putting in your car. So if this is the rear end and this is the front end, we always know that we want all of our ballast to be placed inside of these 4 wheels on the car. And most racers do a pretty good job of doing this. And what this has to do with, it has to do with the drivability of the car. So if this is the center of the car here, the center of gravity of where the car is overall, as weight is more concentrated closer to this center, it becomes easier to get this car to change rotational direction so you can turn the car faster and you can stop it from turning faster. What this has to do with is if you take a weight and you put it on the end of a string, the shorter that string is, the easier it is to spin that weight. And then the longer the string is, the harder and the more pressure it is. So it's this centrifugal force, and what they call this is polar moment. You'll hear people say like swing weight and stuff, and that's correct terms. But what it is from an engineering standpoint, we're talking about the polar moment of the car. And for that reason, that is why when they say when you bolt lead on to be inside of your wheels, it's for that reason. You're wanting this car to be more drivable. Why is it applicable on the track? Because, for example, if you have a ill-handling car, and let's say your car is way too tight going into the turn, and you run your brakes all the way to the rear to lock up and get your car to skate out so you can get your car to rotate. Well, if you've got a lot of weight that is outside of the rear and the front of your car, once you get it turning, it becomes harder to stop it from turning. So the car will spin out on you easier. And Same thing, if you're running in traffic, or for example, if you are overtaking cars and you're passing cars and you've been running high line and you find that you suddenly need to shift to the bottom of the track in order to pass some cars, as that polar moment is smaller, narrower, you've got all the weight in tighter on your car, it's easier for you to get your car to change position on the track, to get your car turned and dive down and catfish around the bottom if you need to, and then move right back to the top when you need to. It all makes for better drivability of the car. The rear end, the one thing that gets ignored is having the fuel cell sitting behind the rear end of the car, because everybody just assumes it has to be there, and in most cases on a lot of builds it does. It's the only place it can go, but that's a lot of weight, and not only is it a lot of weight, but it's weight that is changing throughout the race. So now I've got something that is having a big impact on how hard I can pitch the car in on a turn, turning the car, getting the car to stop turning. So the drivability of the car as this fuel burns off, that's changing more significantly. So if I can move that from this side of that rear end over to this side of that rear end, now as I'm burning fuel off, I'm having a smaller impact on the drivability of the car. Not only overall have I moved weight inside of the four wheels, it's helping the car overall, but then also, as this changes in its amount of weight, it's having a smaller impact on the scaling of the car. And so that's why we want to move it forward. The other part of it, though, that I want to address is the height of it, because it is high in my car. And so when we look at the car from a side view, and here we are, we've got our cage sitting here, and we're going to put this fuel cell in right here. Okay, and so you say, well, it's very high, and it is. It's high relative to where my center of gravity is. Now remember, center of gravity, like for me, I'm a large person, so I weigh a lot. Well, when I sit in the seat of this car, and for most adults, your center of gravity is right above your hips. When you're sitting in a car, if this is me sitting in the car here, and wow, I'm really ugly, but if I'm sitting in the car here, my center of gravity will be right above my hips. It's not up here at your chest. This is not your center of gravity, because you got all your legs and everything down here. So it's right above your hips. It's about where the seat joints, where your seatbelt comes across here, right up in there. That's where your center of gravity is. Well, for me being a large person, that's moving my center of gravity down on this car. And so having the fuel tank sitting above that works better for me. But just keep in mind as well that I'm going to have to bolt ballast onto this car. And so the difference may be that I'm bolting ballast down lower on this frame rail instead of maybe higher above, or higher up above here. It's putting me in a position where maybe I'm mounting my battery down lower on my frame, or I'm mounting my lead down lower on the frame in order to get my CG where I'm looking for as far as drivability and characteristics of the car. Now, one of our subscribers on the channel I was talking to, he pointed out to me, we were talking about where to put this fuel cell, and he pointed out to me that putting the fuel cell much lower in your chassis can be an advantage, because in a long race where the track is going to really slick off and you're going to be losing bite as the race progresses, so 40 or 50 lap races, as that fuel burns off and it's sitting low, your CG is going to rise in the car. So the car is going to become more drivable as you progress through a race where that you're losing your tires and the car is getting slick, or the track's getting slick. And so that's going to help you. And he's right about that. I agree with that. But the only way that you could do that is to have that fuel cell sitting behind your rear end. And so like you have the ability to mount it low behind your rear wheels versus high. Now I mount my fuel tanks, even in previous cars, higher even when they were behind the rear end. But I looked at the scenario and I said, well, low here versus higher here. With the trade-offs, I would rather be high here overall, because even if I'm lower, and that does help me, I still have this amount of weight behind the rear end that is changing the characteristics of the car and making the car less drivable, working in traffic, getting the car to rotate and turn regardless. And so I want to address that. This is a very valid point. I agree with it. But what it's driving to me is that, okay, I want my fuel cell here, but let's make sure I can get it as close to my CG as possible. So we're getting it right down in there as tight as we can as a part of this. We're also getting it as close to the center as we can because everything's packing in here tight. The one other thing that I want to point out is safety. From a safety standpoint, I am much happier with this design. I really like this because my top halo for my car, I've got my down bars coming down into the frame here. I am putting this fuel cell in the most protected place on this car other than me on this side of this chassis. I've got tubes coming down over the top to stop intrusion from above. I'm sitting in here right behind my cage and I'll have tubes that'll be coming across on each side of it, protecting it. This big chassis frame right here, and then the bars itself, creating a tremendous amount of strength as well. And from underneath, I'm going to put a plate under the bottom of it as well to protect it from underneath. So this is a very safe location for me to put this in. And what this could prevent is if you have your fuel cell sitting on the rear of your frame back here, when I've seen ruptured fuel cells, it's typically because you've taken a very hard shot right at the rear of the car at 90 degrees and it twists and folds this over, and you would have to put a tremendous amount of tubing back there to stop that from happening to that, getting into that fuel cell right there. And if you twist the fuel cell enough, you can rupture it. And so I'm looking at that and I'm saying this is a very safe location to put my fuel cell to protect it from any type of intrusions that could happen. And it allows me the luxury of being able to make the back of my car be very lightweight and disposable. So I can avoid putting a lot of tubing back here behind the rear wheels. And in a wreck, I may completely lose all of that, and then I can just bolt on another piece. I haven't lost anything. I haven't compromised the safety of the car or the structural integrity of the car. Because if I really beef all this up just to protect this fuel tank, then when I take a hit, I'm going to transfer that hit into the front of my car. If I leave this as a collapsible type system in the rear of the car, then if I do lose this in a violent wreck, I'm not going to be transferring that into the front of the car, messing up my pickup points and locations and stuff for my rear end. So the car will still be drivable. You come home, you're doing cosmetic repair, you're going right back to the racetrack, you don't have to worry about your frame being bent. So a lot of reasons it's going there. Let's mount it up. All right, Ryan. Sit it down here and let's mark it up. Right. So we've trimmed it to fit. What we're going to do is we're going to sit it down in here. And we kind of know it's kind of already like Lego blocks sitting in here. I believe that's it right there. Plugs in. Right. Let's see. It's not going to exactly sit level. This cage, remember, this is sitting at 5 degrees. And so we kind of worked out, and that's what we trimmed a little bit. And what we're trying to do is get this fuel cell to sit level in this slot right here and close to it. So what we're going to do is make sure it's level side to side. Hang on, Ryan, let me see. Make sure it's level side to side. That's 0. All right, so we must have something right. I'm going to take a marker and mark along the bottom here. Get over here on this other side. Take a marker and mark along this bottom. So that's where the plate's going to be on this side. And then you're up against it, right? All the way to the... Yep.
Let me double check. All right, it stopped right there.
Okay. Sit it back up just a little bit. And then where it's sitting here, mark that. All right, pull it out. Let's put the plate in.
Get you.
Oh, yeah, get from here. Whoa. You gotta put it back on the same level. So where are we? All right, so we're at 0.9. So we're 1 degree pitch back, and that's just, I'm okay, because that's just getting the best plug in there. So we're back 1 degree. That's great. Nothing wrong with that. All right. we've got a 1/8 inch plate that's going in right here. And the reason I'm going with 1/8, of course, it's in the perfect spot from a weight standpoint, so weight's fine. I mean, I could have put a 1/2 inch plate right here, it probably would have helped us. But I'm gonna put a 1/8 inch plate in here because one of the things that I want to make sure is that I'm very safe with this drive shaft underneath this fuel cell. And of course the fuel cell itself has got a metal box that it's in with a bladder, but then we're gonna have this solid 1/8 inch plate welded up. So if we sling a drive shaft, there's no concern there that I'll have as far as it protruding into the fuel cell, because that is the one thing that I see that's a drawback of this. But adding the plate for safety completely resolves that as an issue. And so that's the first thing that goes in. And then that's something, then we sit the fuel cell on it, so it makes it easy. So we're gonna add, see how that sits on the lines. So it will practically sit. And it needs to come up a half. I gotta mark this because the marker is a little bit low. Hang on, pull it out for a second, Bubba. All right, so we're gonna put our 3/4 inch bar under that. That's a 26 inch bar here, Rico. Good to go, Ryan?
Need some
Yep.
just like this right here?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Drop it down, get that black line above it, right there, Bubba. Before we weld any further, let's throw the plate up there and just test fit everything. Let's see where we're at. Should sit right. See what it looks like. If we've got everything right, we're fixing to find out, aren't we? It looks like I may have to trim right there just a little bit.
You ready?
Yep, sit her in there. Way over. Yep.
Right. Oh yeah, you got clearance right here.
Yep. All right, y'all check it out. You see that gap right there that I've got, and that's because of where this plate works out. You know, of course, it's not perfectly flat, but we mounted a piece of 3/4 inch square tubing over there so that we can trim this to fit and then slide it back. So I'm going to say, Ryan, we take a marker and we mark these corners, and then we just start trimming and sliding this back away, and then when we get a good fit up on this side, and hopefully we're still sitting on our ledge over here on that side, and then we'll just weld it up and it'll be good to go. Trace the let's just trace the angle. All right, let's take it off that cut-off saw and we just cut that, and then we'll see where we're at. Okay,
All right.
so Ryan, you got her cut. Throw her up there, Bubba.
All right. Put it up here.
Yep.
Get it level here.
Yep. Level here, level there. Oh, whoop. Just a little bit more to the rear. You got our 1/8 inch plate welded in, and I smoothed down this weld on the top right here. Don't judge me, y'all. I'm doing one-handed, but I did the best I could. But smooth this down just a little bit, because that wedge, I don't want to have little spots where it's sitting there cutting into that if it's touching it. All right, so we got this piece of 3/4 here. Cut the wedge on one end. Fits right in there like that. You got it? All right, Ryan, let's drop her back in. See where we're at with it. Okay, so we've taken the 3 bolts out here. And all right, we're in there.
Yes, we are.
Okay, and what we're gonna do, we're gonna put the 3/4 inch here in, figure out, put a piece, whatever straight down is right here to weld it in. Probably just clamp it to it, spot it on, mark our holes, do the same thing on both sides. So tape measure, let's see. We can cut this a little long and then trim it after we put the upright. So let's cut us a 16-inch piece, Ryan. All right, we got this tube in, as y'all can see. I've spotted it on this end. I got a pair of vice grips clamping it up to the fuel cell. I took the bolts out, so I took a drill and I made marks. I'll drill it completely, that way I can go deep enough all the way through with the tank out. Now I'm gonna put it upright right here. Right, we need about 8 1/8 inch is what we need, Bubba. Now I'm spotting this with the fuel tank on, but I want to make very clear, this is a new tank that has never had fuel in it. It has no fumes of fuel or nothing. And so I would not necessarily be this liberal with it if this was an old fuel tank that had been run and had fuel, fumes, whatever. Then yeah, I would probably be taking and doing this and getting the fuel tank out of the way while I was welding or spotting stuff up. So just be aware of that. There's no fuel that's ever been present in this fuel tank, and so that really affords me a little bit more liberty about how I'm doing this. Y'all be safe out there, man. All right, I got it. All right, Buckaroo, come on. Get it in here. So we got that side good to go. This side. I see that I forgot to knock. Pull it out for let me back for just a second. I gotta knock the wheel. Meal scale gotta go. Meal scale gotta go, y'all. Can't leave that. We're over. All right, check our holes over there.
They line up.
Are they lined up? All three of them? You want to drop the bolts in them just so we don't have to worry about it?
Yes, that's a great idea.
Let's drop some bolts in them and you got to worry about it. I really like this. What I'm thinking on this is when we're done, after everything's painted and stuff, I'll probably cut a piece of rubber like floor mat in here, just so that it stands a little bit proud of these rails and it pinches. That way it squeezes the fuel tank into it. Kind of puts a little bit of a pinch on it. Stop any rattling or anything like that. Metal sitting there, shimmying against each other. All right, all three of them started. All right, tubes up underneath you there, buddy. And, okay.
Which end?
Yep, this end, and that's down. Grab the vice grips over there. And see if we can just line right to that edge and clamp it up. Way out, down here. Right. Clamp snot out of it. Alright. So I can hold it up. And then while I weld it up. You hold it, and I'll mark it. We'll put a spot on that end, and then we'll put a spot on the other end. See how close we are. That'll tell us something. All right, so let's see what we got here. All right, so we've got 3/4 inch tubing, 3 bolts on each side. We'll do grade 8, quarter 20 hardware on both sides for this, bolting it down. I'll probably put some type of like a piece of thin rubber, like a floor mat in here. It'll raise it just a little bit. That way I get a good bind on it. No rattling, no rubbing, anything like that going on. For the rules for crate racing, I will put 2 flat straps across the top, but fuel cells can move under flat straps. I really like a cage like this or something you're bolted securely to. So for me, this is the security. The flat straps are just to meet rule requirements. And Ryan, let's sit it in here. And let's see what else. Oh, Fred Trammell and Jeff Almakinder, they just joined up as sponsors of our channel. And I really appreciate that, guys. Thank y'all. So if you want to look into becoming a sponsor member of our channel, just check out the description at the end. And I've got a link to it there. Sure does make a difference for us. And so, yeah, I'll put, let's see how that fits up there. I can't see where I'm at, Bubba. Put it in there. Let's see. There. Oh, yeah. I just wanted to see. Yep, it's going to work this way. Looks good. So I have a question for you. If you could move your fuel cell anywhere you wanted to be the most optimal, for your car and how it handles, where would you move it? Would you keep it where it is, or would you relocate it to a different spot that's drastically different like this? Leave me a comment, let me know. I'm really interested to know, are we just really way out in left field, or does this make sense if you're able to do it, to do something like this? So I'm really looking forward to that in the comment section, and I appreciate it. Also, I'd like to note, we have passed 2,000 subscribers. I am just blown away. We are growing like gangbusters, and so that just is really, I've been down with having the rotor cup surgery and stuff, but I'm just so excited to get this build done and get this car on the track, because there's so many people that are engaged and commenting and liking and following it and everything. So I just want to be able to get out there and see what it does so that we can just show y'all that, good or bad. I don't expect it to be perfect when we first put it on the track, but man, I am ready for spring to come, and let's see what it does. Anyway, Ryan sometimes shakes his head and looks at some of it and everything, so I got to take him to the track with me and see if I can't make a believer out of him. Thank y'all. See you next time. All right, so let's try it again. We'll do a couple. Loosen up, Bubba.
Oh, I'm just tired.
So the reason that this works so well is because we're just talking to, the people. In other words, so imagine that one of your buddies or whatever, you're explaining stuff to them and they're here in the shop with you. The camera is just somebody, in other words, that we're just talking to or whatever. That's what makes this work so well. So, okay, you with me?
Gotcha.
Don't be nervous. All right, so let's try it again.